Howdy, folks. Happy Wednesday. Happy hump day. It's muggy and rainy, and it's raining all over the Northeast. Friends of mine who live downstate New York near West Point sent me photos of what happened with the rainstorm, where they got like 7 inches in 3 hours. And it was like, streets with cars with water up to the door, up to the windows. It was like,
yeah, there was flooding in some places in Pennsylvania, some bad flooding in Vermont. They're hoping some dams don't break in Vermont. It's that bad. So yeah, there's been some really bad weather.
Yeah. Start us off with the pre-show.
So let's talk about the All-Star game. Actually, I thought I saw some improvement in the All-Star game, and maybe it's because the players who wanted to play there played. So in other words, early in the game, there were some great plays made against the wall, like some really good catches, like high quality catches. They weren't like, Adolphus Garcia was like, he was an inch from really smashing into the wall and really played the ball.
Well, the sun was really, I actually, because there was nothing else on last night, I actually watched it. Adolphus Garcia and Randy Arozarena made like
tremendous catches.
Yeah.
So I saw that. The pitching's the pitching. Usually the pitching's pretty good. And it was, the fact that they were talking to players was fine. I just think overall it had a decent feel. Like it had a feel of maybe like one of those 90s All-Star games where we sort of liked it. Now, at the end, Craig Kimbrell made it tough for NL fans to feel good about the win because he really almost blew it, but he didn't. And Kimbrell got the win, and Rob Thompson, for the Phillies manager, gets the big win for the NL. 12 years in the making. I was laughing, Mike, because when I was at the casinos the other day, they did have odds on the game, and it was something like -30 and -105. But it's like, the AL had won so many years in a row. It's like, who would have bet the NL at this point?
Yeah, who's betting the friggin' All-Star game?
You've got too random,
compulsive gambling idiot to do that.
It's just too random. And and like guys like Kodai Senga didn't even play because he didn't want to mess up his spot in the rotation. So I get it.
Well, it went from bad to worse for the Toronto Blue Jays, because the only bad news that came out of the game was Jordan Romano got hurt. It doesn't sound like it was anything serious or arm related, but it was back tightness, and they pulled him in the middle of the inning. So for a team that's sort of underachieving this year, to come out of the All-Star game with an injury to your closer isn't exactly the best news.
No, and home run derby was fine. I was worried about J-Rod beating Pete because of the age factor and the home factor, and he did. He didn't win it, though. Vlad Jr. won it, but still, J-Rod cranked 41 homers. I still think they need to shorten the event, though. I wrote about it on Full Press. It's a little too long.
Well, I mean, they have 16 players,
right,
and they go in brackets.
Yeah.
So how about like getting it down to 8?
Yeah, 8 might be better. I get it's TV and you got to fill the time somehow, but I think 8 might be better. Maybe you could do other interviews. But there was a funny kind of cringy moment before the game started. They had, of course, Fox always has to put these guys like on the field or some place where it just doesn't seem natural.
I know what you're going to talk about.
So they put A-Rod on the field and Jeter's on the field and Ortiz, and they have Cal Ripken Jr. on the field. And this was like Cal Ripken Jr., like I think at some point did not want to be in this interview, or at least the way it was being done.
Well, let's rephrase that. Let's rephrase that. We didn't want Cal Ripken in the interview because Cal Ripken could be the most boring human being.
Well, that's fair too.
Oh my God. I mean, okay, first of all, you're not going to, can I disingenuousness for 10,000, Alex. I mean, it's like, Alex Rodriguez, Derek Jeter, and Big Papi all happy together and all.
Yeah, big happy Fox family. That was good.
Yeah, please. It's like, okay. And then they cut to them, and they're sitting in the front row, and Big Papi's got this big thing of cotton candy sitting in front of him. And I'm like, yeah, like I really believe that you're eating any of that, Big Papi. Give me a break.
My basic criticism, though, of the interview, knowing that it's Cal Ripken, just putting plaudits on him for being like the big shortstop and you laid the foundation, like there are no questions in that.
No, and
talk about his career. Don't
talk about. Sounds like talk about.
Well,
it's even worse. Actually, in some ways, it's even worse than talk about. It's like I'm going to start you, and then you're going to ... and then finish everything. Which honestly is number one, bad. Just terrible interviewing technique to begin with. I mean, basically, and do my work for me. I'm like, no,
you had no professionals. Anthony, you had no professionals there. You had 4 ex-ball players. None of them are really great broadcasters, and they're fumbling around, like non-broadcasters. And I have to say this: like me and a bunch of friends were watching this because again, there was nothing else to watch. Lifelong baseball fans, and me being the hot take bandit that I am, I came out and said, Cal Ripken could be the most overrated ball player of all time. He really could. Because, other than the streak, there were years when he hit 220. He was not
25-80 every year.
Yeah, not every year.
I think he was, I think he was in an era where there was not a lot of power. I think he was was as short. This was an era growing up where shortstops were
they were nothing.
They were primary glove first.
Tim Foley, Mark Belanger, Larry Boa.
Yeah. I mean, you could say if you put him in this era, obviously with the current shortstops, it's a different story. Right. You could say that then, but I think for the era that he's in, Mike,
no. See that's where I think we're off here because he came up in '82, and right. I know this now. So this was already when Robin Yount was a shortstop, and Alan Trammell was a shortstop, and Gary Templeton, and Ozzie Smith. And
Ozzie was a lot of.
Ozzie was a light hitting shortstop until he got to the Cardinals. But I mean, there were the prototypes there of a big hitting shortstop.
But still, not the way Ripken was. Not on a consistent basis the way he was.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I'm looking at his numbers. Hold on, Mike. I mean, there were years.
That's what happens, Mike. You come in with a hot take, and you're about to get on the ground.
You're wrong. Sorry,
there were years he had over 200 hits.
Yes.
Like, come on, man.
No. In the end, he was a compiler.
A compiler that had 3,184 hits. You don't compile over 3,000
So did Craig Biggio. He was a compiler.
Oh my! And he was. Oh God, get out! Seriously, let's move on with the show, Mike.
Let's start the show because you guys know nothing.
Yeah, okay, Mike. Just because you have last word. Go ahead.
Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, July 12th, 2023.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And back from the heat of Tampa, it's Anthony Mangione. How is everybody?
And I am Michael Einstein Agello, and this is HockeyBuzzcast.
Oh my God!
You're not even Einstein Bagels.
All right.
He's definitely got the bagel part down.
Yeah.
I got the whole right. Okay, so let's start with this. The news since Monday, the big news. And we're getting down to, as I said with Kevin a couple days ago, this off season has slowed to a crawl quicker than most off seasons. I mean, we're only 11 days out from July 1st, and it seems like almost every management team is in Muskoka at their cabin up in Ontario. I mean, there's a few signings, and we're going to talk about that, but the big one over the last 48 hours was Keandre Miller coming in on a 2-year bridge deal, which we were talking about on Monday, that he would have to come in around $4 million because I think they had like $6 million in cap space, something like that.
Like he was just be under 4. Like I remember Jan was saying 4.1, and that's when I said if it's more than 4, they're in trouble. Like this is not a good contract. They came in at the right number. They did. They actually, I think it's good for Miller too, because Miller's game isn't fully rounded out, and I do think there's a chance. Because, look, he doesn't even get any real power play time. Adam Fox sucks up most of that. So if Miller can become better defensively and a 50-point guy to 55 every year, he's going to make a lot of money in this league.
Yeah, I mean, he's 23 years old, Anthony, and he comes out of this deal, arbitration eligible after next season. He puts up points. What did he have, Russ? About
33, something like that?
43 points. Yeah, 9 goals, 34. He does that 2 more years. He's going to be making $6.5, $7 million on a long-term deal.
And I would tell you as well is that we're also seeing we're starting to seeing some themes here with this offseason that young players are betting on themselves. They're anticipating, obviously the fact that the cap is where it's at right now, and why commit yourself at a low number or a lower number just because the market does it. You bet on yourself for a couple years. We just saw this, obviously. Flyers this past, couple days signed both Noah Cates and Cam York to 2-year deals.
Yep.
And that's where, if you're, they're betting on themselves, and rightfully so. I mean, that's the smart play for them to do.
In 2 years, though, there's going to be an off season that could be tumultuous because
absolutely,
there's a lot of guys doing this, and if that's the year, let's say the cap goes up like, I don't know, $5 million or something.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a lot of action on some.
There will be.
They think the cap is going to go up $3 to $4 million next year, and then $3 to $4 million the year after that. So with $8 million times 32 teams in there and expiring contracts, things are going to explode.
And there's mutual things here too, because if you do 2-year deals, as Miller just did, as York did, it does work for the team too. Mm-hmm. Because if you take him to 3, you're walking them basically to you're going to walk them to unrestricted free agency.
They still have a year where they still got a year
to shake things out, and have 2 years here where you're like, okay, now we know what we have. Now we're willing to commit long term.
Right. So, and now the funny thing is, I think this obviously has. Now you're right, Anthony, in terms of these players are betting on themselves, but they really have no choice other than to bet on themselves, because teams out there are not. They're not, okay, for example, if the Rangers were at all possible, they wanted to sign him to an 8-year deal. Right now, since they're so far up against the cap, they can't do that. Teams like Buffalo, they want to sign Owen Power for 8 years, and they have the cap space to do it. But Owen Power may want to say, no, let's do the bridge, because in 2 years, there's going to be a lot more money in the market. Not that he's going to be an unrestricted free agent, but he has 2 more years like Miller did.
Yeah,
he's going to get 7, 8.5, 9.
Teams are trying to, especially teams that are in rebuild mode, are trying to build their teams, and they're trying to get they're trying like hell right now to get under market their star players. They may believe to be star players at under market, so that they can build legit contenders and have those bedrock players for a long time at an under market. And then later on, you can try to negotiate potentially deals here where, again, that's really what everybody's trying to do right now. But again, the way the market is set right now, I don't blame any young player for doing what they're doing right now.
No, I think Mike's right too. I don't think Power will take a long-term lesser AA.
You know your value. He knows his value. He absolutely knows his value.
But unlike Dahlin, who had big offensive years before he signed his 3-year deal, and his 3-year deal is up after next season. He's got 1 year arbitration before he goes UFA. It sounds like the Sabres are going to pay him $10 million plus, and they're smart to do it, even on an 8-year deal. Power is in a different position. He's only got a year left in his contract. He puts up another. They want to get him on the next deal now, because if he hits it big, if he scores 50 points next year, then the ask as a restricted free agent is going to be probably where Dahlin was, which was $6 million a year. They want to get Power as close as they can get to what Miller just got paid from the Rangers, because that gives them a lot more flexibility next year.
Yeah, if they can do it. But they already have Samuelson locked up, so they're not in bad shape. I think they'll have the 3. Those 3 will be their core, and then whatever else is around them will be around them. And that's kind of how you have to build the defense now.
Yeah, and more money drops off after a couple years, so then they'd have the flexibility. So, some interesting signings over the last 48 hours. Some of them just, I'm rooting for Travis Dermott. He was a second-round pick of the Leafs. He got traded to Vancouver. Didn't get a lot of opportunity because of injury. He signed a 1-year 2-way deal with Arizona. The one thing with Arizona, Russ, he's going to get playing time. He's going to get lots of playing time.
Loads of ice time.
So I'm hoping he can stay healthy. And then, maybe he gets another contract out of that. I like his talent. I think in Toronto, he got sort of pigeonholed into that bottom pairing situation, and maybe in Arizona, he can be sort of a late bloomer.
Yeah, I think he could be a late bloomer, and I think he'll get dealt at the deadline. I don't think they're going to hold on to him. But that's fine. He's going to get all the ice time. He'll get power play time, maybe second power play. And there is ability there, and he's only 26. So he is a guy that I wouldn't give up on either. So I think that's a good, smart signing for Arizona. It's good for him to get signed. Like, just get signed. That's the most important thing.
Now, it was very interesting to see the comments, Anthony, of Pierre Dorian, the GM of the Ottawa Senators, at least right now he is, and his comments about the DeBrincat trade, because it's being panned in Ottawa. They didn't think they got enough for a guy who's been a 2-time 40-goal scorer. And Dorian came out on Ottawa radio and said that DeBrincat sort of handcuffed him because the only team he would sign an extension with was Detroit. So, I mean, but that was and this is where I don't give Dorian any sort of defense. They knew last year when they were trading for him, unless they could get him in on a long-term deal at that point, that this was very likely.
There's a risk. Yeah, there was always a risk when they made this deal, and it looked great at the time for them.
Sure,
but this trade was made with the hope, and again, you have to be extremely careful with hope here, that he would come to Ottawa, see how they're growing their team, and say, "Hey, I want to sign in for the long term." There's a nice balance, and again, they go and get Chychrun, obviously, which I think was a good move on their part. Gave up a little bit, but that was that's what they were banking on. And again, at the end of the day, DeBrincat knows his value. Again, going back to a guy who knows his value and says, is this where, again, he wants to call a shot to say where he wants to be.
Right.
And because when you're a multi-40 goal scorer, your value is obviously much higher than what your standard RFAs are going to be. And he was able to call his shot. And again, I get the frustration in Ottawa. I genuinely do. But again, you're also, if he's going to Detroit, and Steve Yzerman is an exceptionally tough negotiator. We know that. And, the quote that, Yzerman said, he said, "I did the best deal for my team." And I believe Pierre believes he did the best deal for his team. So for as much plaudits as Dorian gets for last year, this is unfortunately the other end of things. And he hoped that DeBrincat would be like, this really looks like, a place for me to set down roots. They misread that.
Okay. Raise your hand, though, if you're on this panel and you thought when that trade was made that basically he went to Ottawa, that DeBrincat went there, that he was ever going to stay there long term, because I never felt like he was gonna.
Yep. No, I didn't think it was likely. So again, this was
they had to have an inkling.
We were sitting.
I think they were hoping. Here's the thing. I think they were hoping that if they were going to have to trade him, that the market would be much more robust than it turned out to be.
That's fair.
Basically, both the market was misread. The player also made it difficult. And any team, again, and I don't think it was just, I know it was just Detroit, but there was also reports saying there was any of the other teams that he had given.
Well, that's what Dorian said. So.
Any of the teams he given weren't interested in him. That was Dorian's, and that.
I think
and
Dorian had a spin on this too. We have to.
Of course, there's a spin on this. He's been in a precarious situation for
like the last 6 months.
The last 6 months, and I mean, the AGM is the assistant general manager was just dismissed,
right?
And that's apparently, according to Chris Stevenson, he hasn't been ever since his brother was dismissed with Binghamton.
Yeah.
Trent hasn't even been allowed in the Canadian ties, in the arena since February.
Yeah.
So it's just a strange situation all around right now in Ottawa.
It is.
Yeah. Okay. Then now in the category of players, some of them, I would say didn't have a choice, but in the category of players who are betting on themselves on 1-year deals. The Philip Zadina situation came full circle after the mutual termination of his deal in Detroit. He signs a 1-year deal with San Jose at $1.1 million. The money is not the important thing here, Russ. It's San Jose, and he's going to get opportunity that I don't think the only other place he'd get better opportunity is Arizona, because he could probably be but I think he'll be a top 6, at least he'll get a top 6 opportunity in San Jose, and maybe he flourishes there.
Yeah, I mean, look, Detroit got him better away from the puck. They did. I pointed out on another show that for some real reason, his shooting percentage went awry, like his shots that got through. Now, he had a lot of shots that went through, but he didn't score a lot. So maybe he hit the post a lot. Maybe he hit guys a lot. Maybe, so I think a change was probably going to be good for him. Quinn is good with younger players, which he still is. He's going to get a load of ice time. He still has a great shot. Yeah, this is a good pickup for San Jose, and it's smart for Zadina because
there's also better players in their tops. There's also better players in their tops.
Yeah, absolutely.
Versus Arizona. It's simple as that. He's going to if he's going to have an opportunity to succeed, San Jose still is a better spot for him. Probably a perfect spot for him.
Yeah, he could play with Couture. He could play with William Eklund. I mean, he could play with offensively creative players and benefit from it. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a positive for him. Now, the other one, and I was a little surprised that Montreal did not qualify Denis Gurianov, and he signs a 1-year deal with Barry Trotz in Nashville. Now, again, I think he may get more of an opportunity that he might have gotten in Montreal. I think Montreal would have had him in their top 9.
I get the impression that Montreal just kind of soured on Gurianov. That's based on what I'm seeing right now. The reason why I didn't qualify him is that they got him. I think they had maybe some expectations of what he would provide. Didn't really do it. And they just decided to cut. To me, it just looked like they decided just to cut bait.
Yeah, I think the qualifying offer was over $2 million, so it might have been some bookkeeping there.
Yeah, for sure.
I give Trotz credit though. Trotz, said in the draft he wanted to kind of swing for the fences. I think this is swinging for the fences, like picking him up because he knows the ability's there, the speed is there. You've got to just get him back on track because he's not that far removed from a 20-goal season, and he does have talent. So I like what they did here.
Now, one of the things I also think is another theme of the offseason, as well as the guy. I think teams are definitely sniffing around the non-qualified player.
Oh yeah,
and I think it's a better. I do believe that's a better investment than necessarily always looking, especially for teams like Nashville, like San Jose, like Philadelphia. Those teams that are trying to kind of start from scratch and are trying to get a look and see what those players might be able to do.
Well, the non-qualified guys and the buyout guys seem to be more amenable to taking that 1-year deal to sort of reprove themselves. And, I mean, with Gurianov, obviously he didn't get qualified. I think he's going to get opportunity. Guys like that have been bought out over the last couple weeks, I think are doing the same thing. They're willing, Matt Duchene took a 1-year deal in Dallas. And now he got $3 million, but this was after making 8 or 9 in Nashville. He's willing to bet on himself, putting himself in a situation with a talented team, playing with talented players. He puts up a big year. He turns around and hits it big in free agency next year again. So,
I want to point out one thing, Mike, that you may not have seen. The Bruins Twitter feed right now is kind of funny. Because
you mean because it's Lucic Vision right now?
They're showing like Lucic walking around the Boston area, and he doesn't blend in. He doesn't. He's a huge guy.
I never realized looking at him how his shoulders literally his neck is so long. His arms are long and his neck is positioned forward, and his back is just like his head kind of is a bit forward. I've seen him as a player. I've only seen him in pads in the locker room, but it's the first time.
On the same side of the street.
Yeah, he is a large, intimidating.
That's great. They're great tweets. Go look at him. They're fantastic.
Yeah, he's ordering an Italian sandwich up in North Boston. It's fantastic. This is like welcome home, Milan.
I was like, wait a second, is that the missing link? That kind of stuff. It's like, wow.
Okay. I love it. No, I love it.
He's an intimidating looking human being.
He really is.
Yeah. Now, in the category of players like going back home and taking less to go back home, Oscar Sundquist, who was in St. Louis originally, won a cup with them in 2019, went to Detroit, got traded at the deadline to Minnesota. He goes back to St. Louis on a 1-year deal for the league minimum, $775,000. Now, I hope for his sake that he got some no trade or no move protection, because he'll be flipped at the deadline like nobody's business by Doug Armstrong at that money if he comes back and plays pretty well. So, but he goes back to St. Louis, and that's a team that I think will battle for a playoff spot. But I mean, that's a great value for a guy who I think is a very useful player.
The chat room, by the way, is explaining Lucic has some sort of spine condition where his neck is different.
Okay.
Very good. That was not something I was aware of. So that's the reason why. I never saw him.
Me neither.
In the times I've been in the Bruins locker room at Wells Fargo Center, and when he was there, I only saw him in pads. So this is the first time I've ever seen him sort of without it.
I just noticed how long his arms were because he's walking on the street, and I'm like, regular humans' arms aren't that long.
So those people making Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon man comments, they should stop that.
They should stop. But Sundquist he's an underachiever. Like, I don't care where he goes. He is like fool's gold.
He's been in some good stuff. I think certainly being in St. Louis certainly helped during the Cup run. That helped his profile. But yeah, if he's signing on a 1-year deal and there's and at the league minimum, and it is basically for and there's no trade protection here, which honestly, if you're signing at that level contract at that point, the likelihood that you have a no trade clause at $715,000 is pretty much nil. This was where, I did hear, I remember saying, I think Jeremy Rutherford said he was negotiating with him, then he kind of backed away, and now for sure he's obviously he's signed.
If you're making
maybe there was a couple offers that he thought was going to be there, and they evaporated.
If you're making 7-15, you lost the negotiation.
You're happy to be in an NHL job, basically. And listen, he knows the team, he knows it well, and it'll be fine. But he is.
But he will be a depth forward for them. There are some players like I think Giordano. He took the way less than he could have gotten on the open market. He got $800,000 from the Leafs, and I believe he's got
what if he's pursuing a Stanley Cup, he may have gotten. I always say when you're at the point of the career where Mark Giordano is at,
right.
The main thing right now is you've made your money. You've already had your legacy contract. Where at this point now it's pure pursuit of a cup. Nobody, if anybody's offering you a big chunk of money at this point, it's probably a team that's nowhere near a cup.
Right. Now, on the Dominoes page, which is always fascinating when it comes to the summer, because, we thought, okay, the DeBrincat deal would sort of shake things loose in terms of, the dominoes, in terms of the next player signing someplace else. The one name that was talked about was Tarasenko. We haven't heard anything yet, but I'll bet you anything. And he changed agents, so that may have slowed down the process. Mm-hmm. On the defensive side, Matt Dumba is still unsigned. There's talk about San Jose and Arizona. It might be a situation where he wants a longer-term deal, or he wants a shorter-term deal to hit it big in a year or two when the cap goes up. The Erik Karlsson thing is continuing to be fascinating. It continues to sound like there's two teams and only two teams, and that's Carolina and Pittsburgh. And Elliot Friedman did a spot on NHL Network and essentially said that. It says it's Carolina and it's Pittsburgh. And at this point, I'd be stunned if it isn't one of those two.
Although there's always that mystery team, Mike. When
I'm
going to say this. No, but I'm going to say this.
Mystery.
When negotiations drag on this long, it does bring up the opportunity for that mystery team. It does.
Yeah, and San Jose, it doesn't, and I would say that it doesn't. Whilst he may want to be traded, San Jose's got time here.
Yeah,
they can wait. They can wait this thing out. But again, it also a number of other deals, and I've already said this already. I firmly believe that the reason why the Tony DeAngelo deal to Carolina hasn't happened yet is because Carolina wants to see where things are at with Erik Karlsson first.
And honestly, the fact that deal hasn't happened yet, and is to me, it's like it's got Daniel Briere by the short hairs, because I think they were.
It does. Yeah. It does. He can wait, and then they can call again. They're at the end of the day, Carolina's the one doing the Flyers the favor here. They're taking on DeAngelo at 50.
Nobody else wants him.
Nobody, and they have no choice in this circumstance but to wait on this, and that's just going to be the way it's going to be. For now. Now, again, it's a weird situation because, again, Waddell was quoted, right? He was quoted as saying, we're, July 8, July 9, in terms of the deal. So if he backs out of that, that's something that, can potentially not look great for him. But the thing is, if you already have a Karlsson, you already have Orlov, where are you using Tony? Where is Tony DeAngelo going to be fitting in?
I think he felt like he was getting Karlsson and he was moving Pesci. If all of a sudden one of those things don't happen,
right, exactly, and there's still parts that can still potentially be moved.
Take on D'Angelo. Then that's probably the situation where they can't take him on.
I can't see how they make a Karlsson deal without moving Pesci, because whether it's now apparently, and I know that Elliott said this, Pesci has no trade protection that may prevent him from being sent to San Jose. So it might be a situation where he gets moved someplace else for a first-round pick, and then they use the first-round pick as part. Now, that could complicate things, and that may be what's slowing things down because, I mean, I'm sure there are teams out there like Nashville was one of the teams mentioned regarding Pesci. I know Buffalo has been mentioned regarding Pesci, and Toronto has been but, some of these teams don't have cap space. So, and the lack of cap space is a complicating factor. But I mean, I'd be stunned at this point if Karlsson is not on a different team to start the season. It just seems to me that, the narrative
they're just trying to get the bidding war going here, Mike. That's really what this is.
I would say this.
As high as they can get it.
If they, and again, this player has a modified no trade too, but if they can't move Pesci, maybe then they'll have to move Teravainen. Like that may be the guy they have to move. He's only got 1 year left.
Yeah, I mean, that's a possibility for sure.
And that would allow that extra money for Karlsson because they got $2 million under the cap now. They could fit Karlsson, but then at that point, Tony would be out. Like that's it. They wouldn't be able to afford Tony.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Now, sticking on the Flyers page, and this blew up on social media yesterday, and with good reason. So there was a Zoom interview with Garnet Hathaway, I believe.
This is Hathaway.
And there was a question from a Philadelphia reporter that asking him about signing with the Flyers, who are in the midst of a rebuild. I think a legitimate and why he decided to do that, and a legitimate question. And you heard, and apparently it was part of Flyers PR, social media staff that said basically, why is this reporter asking the same question, and used an expletive or two. And this was overheard by everybody, including Hathaway, I believe, because he sort of reacted facially to that. Keith Jones came out fairly quickly, releasing a statement, sort of admonishing the social media staff and apologizing for that. I mean, it was just sort of an embarrassing sort of thing, Anthony. Just not well handled by the Flyers.
No, it wasn't handled. It wasn't handled. I mean, I think the way Keith Jones handled it, I think the way they responded to it, I think was done well. I think it was, they did what they needed to do, but it is not when you are in the midst of trying to change the Flyers, the perception of the Philadelphia Flyers. They started off with their new ad campaign, new jerseys, new era of orange, new leadership. Obviously John Tortorella has already been there for, obviously for a season at this point. This is it's absolutely an embarrassing moment. And again, Danny Briere also went on to the 97.5 the Fanatic here in Philadelphia, also obviously just apologizing, but also obviously acknowledging what happened and apologizing for it. And again, you can my whole thought on this whole situation is, and I said this on Twitter earlier, is that in all walks of life, if you're whatever it is that you do, you got to be professional. You may think it, and you better not audibly say it, and you better not post it. It better not be posted out on social media in this circumstance. So the reporter has every right to ask that question, and even if it's been asked of multiple players, that there's a possibility that the reporter in this case, who is obviously at the point who was asking the question when that happens, has the absolute right. It could be very well in the midst of working on a larger piece where there could be multiple interviews, and this question is a key element of what the organization is trying to do in terms of why these players would be attracted to, veteran players like a Stahl, like a Hathaway, who are veterans, who you would think would be looking to win, get the, to potentially end up on a Stanley Cup winning team. And listen, they may still end up on a Stanley Cup team, but before the end of the season. But why is it that they signed on? What is it about? What is it of the Flyers pitch that made them say it's beyond just they offered me money?
And Russ, I mean, that's the thing. It's like in being in many scrums in Buffalo and in Toronto, and a reporter is doing a piece on a particular aspect of the team. They ask the same question to the the 3 or 4 players or the general manager or the coach in every scrum, because they want to get varying viewpoints. That's not being redundant. That's being thorough.
That's part of being a thorough. That's part of being a thorough reporter.
So to me, this opened up a bigger thing. So the first thing is, look, obviously the member of the social team and possibly 2 members of the social team, based on that other audible sentence after that came out, just do your job. This is your job, whether you like it or not. Like Anthony said, keep it in your head and do your job. If you have to endure this question, too bad. But the other thing is, and without divulging what was in the meeting, we had a large meeting at Professional Hockey Writers Association during the draft. And Molly Walker led that. She had a PowerPoint presentation. And she, got on social media and I think correctly talked about this situation, because it was part of a larger discussion that was already happening based on what happened last year with just media relations between teams and the media, because the media is shrinking and the media has to do a job, and they're trying to be able to do that and navigate their way through. And I believe Danny, when he says he wants that to be better, and I take him at face value on that, but they're not the only team. There's other things going on too. And so that's why if online people feel like the media is being like too sensitive or whatever, it's because this is happening in a lot of different markets that, fans are unaware of, but it affects the coverage that we're able to do. And so that's the bigger thing here.
The media is shrinking, and the media access, you would think, would be opened up more, but that is shrinking as well. So this is the landscape. And at a certain point, the fans, they may react to somebody in the media saying that they're not being, they're being mean or they're being snarky or whatever like that. Media members have a job to do, and they need the access to be able to do that job. And if the team,
if you want a clear, at the end of the day, Mike, if you want a clear, independent, view of things, and not just what is presented, obviously by the team or the subject matter, that this is necessary. This is, all you need to do to me, the New York Times situation over the weekend, to me, rang the biggest alarm bell. They've eliminated an entire department.
Right.
Because, and I think they've also, and I have all the respect in the world for our colleagues who work for The Athletic. They do an excellent job at what they do. That being said, for them to now be sort of the New York Times sports department, that doesn't fly. It's not, the shift to this type of coverage in this circumstance, I have my concerns with. The daily day-to-day is still something that is necessary.
It's not about, like Michael Cohen's like, Flyers media needs a Brooks character to burn towards. It's not about that. Nobody has to challenge. Nobody has to anything. And even Danny made.
It's okay. It's okay to listen. Questions should be asked.
Yeah. I'm just saying in a snarky way. There's no reason to do that. But Briere did say, hold on. Briere did say in this interview that on WIP that he basically was like, listen, we've spoken to John to be more reactive and actually talk to the media even when he doesn't want to after games. So the Flyers are doing the right thing even with their coach, because there are times John doesn't want to talk to us and we know it, but that is his job too.
And what they have to and one other thing, Mike, they also, the Flyers are very, very much, I think, know that because of what's happened the last few seasons, that they are in the Philadelphia market in terms of the visual of the consciousness, and whether it's the mistakes of the previous regime or regimes that came before them. And you have the ascent of the Eagles, you have the ascent of the Phillies, you have the Sixers who are contending, and there you are, and you're not, the last time you've been in the postseason was in the bubble. So that is in this circumstance, that is something that has to be forward and continue. They have to, they have to get themselves more into the Philadelphia fans' consciousness. And one of the ways that happens is, the media, you need to give the media the access. You need to give them the respect that they deserve, and need to give them sort of the opportunity to present stories and present things that people really do want.
Yeah, I do want to answer Mike in the chat room. He said, is it contractual that coaches be required to speak with the media? The head coach is required. Yes.
Yes. And in my issue, and then we'll move off of this. Okay, you may not like Larry Brooks and some of the questions that he does, and him being confrontational with coaches, but that's his job. That's Steve Simmons' job in the Toronto Sun. That's Mike Harrington's job with the Buffalo Sabres. That is their job. Not to be, they're not mean, but they ask pointed questions, and they expect answers. And some of these teams don't want to answer those questions. Well, I get that you don't want to, but you have to, because the fan base expects those answers. And when they start to eliminate the access to the media, then the teams don't have to answer those questions. And then all you do is get the talking points from the team that it's not going to be critical. It's not going to be anything other than what they want to reveal. And that, I think, that's the death of journalism and sports. And I hope that we never see that, but right now it's going in that direction. Okay, to finish off the show, Bet Online came out with odds for winning the Stanley Cup, and it's like, yeah, you always get the most accurate odds in the middle of July. The Colorado Avalanche are the favorite to win the Stanley Cup at 8-1 odds. Now I'll give you the next three: Carolina, Edmonton, and New Jersey are all 9-1. I can see Colorado being a favorite, winning the Stanley Cup last year, winning the Stanley Cup 2 seasons ago, having some injury issues. They've added some players. Carolina, I have no qualms about. Edmonton, I think, is an absolute joke that they think that they're one of the favorites in the West.
Wait, hold on. Why is that a joke?
Because okay, excuse me. You were critical of their goaltending.
I know, but they still have
there's still
a lot there, Mike.
There's a lot there. They are definitely cup contenders, Mike. If you're going to say they're not cup contenders, then the Leafs are definitely not cup contenders.
Well, okay, I wasn't going to talk about the Leafs, but
might as well now.
No. being the second highest odds, or second lowest odds in the Western Conference, when you eliminate you're above the Stanley Cup champions, which is a joke. That's what I'm saying, it's a joke. So
but it's hard to repeat. Like, they're going with the odds of that.
Yeah. Vegas is at 10-1. The New York Rangers at 12-1.
I don't have a problem with any of these odds, by the way.
So far, no. Yeah, I don't. Colorado is an interesting one because I think they did a pretty good job so far this offseason. I'm just not 100% convinced on them, but go ahead.
I'll go down to the middle of the pack, and then we'll end here. Tampa Bay and Toronto are both at 14-1. Toronto's odds dropped 4 points.
That's legitimate.
Yeah, I actually think.
Wait, hold on. If you don't think that right now today that they're worse off than last year, come on, Mike.
I actually think right now not after the deadline, but to start off the season, they're a better team than they were at the beginning of last year.
No, you're just happier that Justin Hall's gone. That doesn't make him a better team.
Well, I mean, that's addition by subtraction.
This is Mike's odds, not Bet Online's odds.
And of course, you should believe.
I can't wait till Mike starts biting his knuckles over John Klingberg.
Oh, it's gonna happen.
Yeah, but at least John Klingberg can score at both ends of the ice. He's responsible for goals in his goal and goals.
Oh, yeah.
You better hope he can keep that offensive clip, because I can already tell you already. I'm going to mark it down, July 12th at 1:47 p.m. That John Klingberg is going to be a favorite whipping post of Mike Augello.
Oh, man, we'll see. But okay, here, just a couple more here. The Boston Bruins took the biggest drop. They were 8-1 on June the 14th, before the draft and free agency, and the fact that Bergeron and Krejci have not signed, and probably at least one of them is retiring, they've dropped from 8-1 to 16-1. They have the same odds as the Dallas Stars, and Russ had to go. Dallas Stars at 16-1. I think that would be my bet. That would be my long shot bet, because I think they're close.
I think so too, and I think there's going to be a lot of motivation after losing to Vegas last year. I think they're on the cusp, and they get a real good performance in net out of Ottinger to get them moving forward. I like the moves they made. I think the Duchesne move, again, if they use him primarily as a winger and it's just focusing in on the scoring end of things, and he's basically, I guess the Gurianov replacement, even though Gurianov already left already. That's how I look at it there. And I think their defense is fairly solid. Dallas is actually a pretty strong, I think a very strong contender there.
Florida and Los Angeles at 18-1, Pittsburgh at 22-1, Seattle at 25-1. And finally,
it's interesting with Pittsburgh, though, like the moves Pittsburgh made, you would look at it separately on paper and say, they look improved. And the odds makers aren't having it. It's very interesting.
I mean, in the short term, they might be improved. I have a problem with some of the contracts that they've signed maybe 2 or 3 years down the road when
I agree.
38 or whatever the heck he is.
Yeah.
And finally, try a trio of Calgary, Minnesota, and the Buffalo Sabres at 33-1.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Sabres have to be in prove-it mode, basically.
Yes. That's it.
I mean, that said, they make the right acquisitions. I think the Sabres can get in the door this year.
I think next year is too soon for saying Stanley Cup.
No. I think they need just to get into the door. That's why I'm at with the Sabres.
And I wrote about that yesterday. I think it is imperative for them not to be content with contending. They must make the playoffs, or people in Buffalo are going to go ballistic. It's 12 years. They've got a lot of potential. They've got a lot of good young players. They showed, upward mobility last year.
But they're not sneaking up on anybody now.
Right. No,
that's the difference now. They got to deal with the added expectations. Teams now know when they see the Sabres on schedule, that is not a walk in the park, and they're going to prepare accordingly.
And I don't trust their goaltending, but we'll see. All right. We will be back on Friday with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast for the departed Russ Cohen.
Russ in peace.
For Anthony Mangione, I'm Michael Lagello. Thanks for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.